I was holding a pot of chicken noodle soup when my son said it. "You're just not a priority anymore, Mom." That was it. No warning. No apology. No eye contact. He grabbed a bowl from the cabinet and walked out of the kitchen like he hadn't just cracked my ribs with a sentence. The football game echoed from the living room. My grandson sat slouched in a corner chair, scrolling. Olivia was at the dining table, tapping away at her laptop like I wasn't even in the room. I stood there, hands trembling slightly from the weight, not of the pot but of understanding. I had brought the soup across town, wrapped it in towels so it wouldn't spill. I'd baked cornbread too because he used to love it. I thought we'd have dinner. I thought we'd talk. I thought I still belonged somewhere. Instead, I stood on the edge of their kitchen, a guest who'd stayed too long. I set the pot down gently. The towel was damp from steam. I looked at Olivia. "Would you like some too?" I asked. She didn't even glance up. "No thanks," she said. "I'm watching my carbs." No one asked me to sit. No one made space. I poured myself a bowl, sat at the far end of the table, and ate quietly while the TV played, and no one spoke to me. The soup tasted like memory, warm, familiar, and suddenly distant. He came back into the kitchen during a commercial, refilled his bowl, and said it again as if to clarify. "We've just got a lot going on right now, Mom. You understand. We have to prioritize." I nodded, not because I agreed, because I didn't want to cry. "You helped. But now you're in the way." That's what he didn't say. But I heard it anyway. They didn't remove me from their life. I finally saw the exit. After dinner, I offered to help clean up. Olivia waved her hand like I'd suggested something absurd. "No, we've got it," she said. "You should probably head back before it gets too dark." So I did. The bus stop was 2 blocks away. The sky was already sliding into dusk, and I didn't have gloves. I walked slowly, letting the cold bite. The pot, wrapped again in its towel, clanged softly in my bag with each step. By the time I got home, the sky was navy and my knees ached. I poured out the rest of the soup. I couldn't bear to taste it again. Not after tonight. I didn't sleep. I just lay there watching the ceiling, repeating his words. "You're just not a priority anymore." And then one thought came in clear, like static finally tuning into a signal. I didn't leave. I just stopped returning. The day before, I'd ironed the tablecloth. Not just any one, the good one. The one with the pale floral stitching I used to bring out for Easter, back when people still sat at my table. I packed it in tissue paper, tucked it into my tote next to a wrapped puzzle book for Tyler, a paperback Olivia might like, and a soft gray-blue scarf I'd found on sale. The kind of color that flatters anyone. The kind of thing I used to buy for myself before I learned not to. I made a note in my little planner. "Don't forget the bay leaf." I'd been simmering broth all morning. Bought fresh parsley, chopped it just so, not because anyone would notice, but because that's how I was taught to care. I double-checked my pills, tucked 3 days' worth into the pill case with the green snap lid. Enough for a weekend visit. Enough for a family who said, "We want you here." My son had said it on the phone 3 days earlier, casual and warm. "Just come by Saturday. Dinner's around 5. It'll be all of us." All of us. That phrase did something to me. I circled it in my mind like it was a promise sealed in gold. I hadn't heard it in so long. So I got ready like it mattered. I washed my hair that morning, took out the coat with the clean buttons, polished the sensible shoes with the low heel. I even put on mascara, though my hands shook a little. I don't remember the last time I cared what I looked like at a dinner table. I stepped outside at 3:15. The wind was sharp. My scarf flapped against my collar, but I didn't tighten it. I liked the cold. It made me feel awake. The ride took 40 minutes. I sat by the window, my bag beside me. I watched a mother and child board, laughing at something in a cereal box. I smiled at them, then quickly looked away. They didn't notice. As I approached their street, my heart began to flutter the way it used to when I'd pick up my son from summer camp. Nervous, hopeful, full of too much air. The house came into view. 2 stories, beige siding, that new black mailbox they installed last spring. A wreath on the door. Pretty. Almost welcoming. I rang the bell. Olivia answered, distracted. "Oh, you're early," she said, and let me in. Inside, the table wasn't set. There were takeout boxes on the counter. My son was barefoot, checking his phone. Tyler didn't look up. Still I smiled. I took out the scarf and offered it to her. I saw this and thought of you. She nodded, said, thanks, but didn't unfold it. I asked if she wanted help with anything. She said, we're keeping it casual tonight. I looked at the table. No plates. No candles. No room. I brought warmth. They brought silence. Later, when I handed him the soup, his mouth curved slightly. You didn't have to. But I did. Because no one else had thought to. And still I believed it meant something, until the next night when he told me it didn't. The next morning I stripped the guest's bed, folding the sheets neatly like I always did, even though no one would notice. Olivia had already left for yoga. My son was in his office, door closed, pretending he had a meeting. I knew better. Tyler passed by the hallway once, earbuds in, said nothing. I opened the blinds. The sun was sharp, but the light didn't feel warm. Just exposing. I had half a mind to make a fresh pot of coffee, maybe bake something simple before leaving. But the kitchen felt like enemy territory now, every drawer unfamiliar, every glance unwelcome. So I busied myself with small kindnesses. Wiping down the sink, emptying the trash, folding towels that had already been folded. At 10:12 my phone buzzed on the dresser. Not a call. Not a message. A notification. I tapped without thinking. A photo loaded, bright and polished. Taken at a restaurant I recognized from a billboard off the freeway. My son. Olivia. Tyler. All dressed nice. Plates of steak and wine glasses raised in mid-toast. Olivia beaming, Tyler with his arm around her, my son lifting a glass. The caption read, only the closest. Only us. Only us. The phrase sat in my throat like a stone. I looked closer. There were 4 chairs visible in the frame. For place settings. I wasn't at the table, not out of frame, not behind the camera. Just not there. And yet I was in the house. In the guest room with my tote bag half packed. Waiting for someone to knock and say, we're going out. Come with us. But that knock had never been coming. I stared at the photo until the screen dimmed. There was a glass of water on the nightstand. I picked it up, sipped once and set it down with care, as if noise might break something already cracked. That night, they hadn't gone to bed early. They had gone out, dressed up, booked a table, toasted to each other. They made a plan without me in it. Not a slip. Not a misunderstanding. A decision. I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. The same way I used to sit by my son's crib when he was teething. They didn't forget me. They removed me. That's when it hit me. It wasn't that I didn't belong anymore. It was that they'd outgrown pretending I did. I opened my phone again. Stared at the photo until the backlight burned my eyes. I tried to remember the last time he had looked at me like I mattered. I couldn't. This wasn't about one dinner. It was about every unopened message, every birthday passed with a let's catch up soon. Every quiet exclusion masked as oversight. I sat still for a long time. Then I stood, pulled the zipper on my tote bag, and packed everything I had brought with twice the care I'd used to unpack it. I didn't yell. I didn't demand an explanation. I didn't ask why they posted a photo that cut me out of their lives while I was still under their roof. I didn't say a word. I picked up my bag from the guest room and zipped it slowly. My fingers were steady. That surprised me. The soup pot sat clean in the dish rack. I'd washed it the night before, out of habit, out of hope. I wrapped it in the same towel and placed it gently at the bottom of my tote. I turned off the light in the guest room, closed the door behind me, stepped through their hallway, through their quiet kitchen. No one noticed. No one stopped me. Outside, the sun was still pretending it was spring, but the wind didn't agree. It bit through my coat as I stepped off their porch. I didn't go to the bus stop. I didn't head home. I walked with no real direction, just the need to move. My legs ached after 3 blocks, but I kept going. Across intersections, past houses with wreaths and porch chairs and barking dogs behind fences. Eventually, I reached a small park I remembered from when Tyler was little. We used to come here with juice boxes and a worn-out kite that never flew right. He had scraped his knee on that blue slide once, and cried like the world had ended. I'd kissed the blood away, told him he was brave. Funny how no one kisses your wounds when you're old. I sat on a bench near the duck pond. The wood was cold and uneven. A jogger passed. A woman with a stroller glanced at me and then away. I could have been anyone. And for the first time in years, I liked that idea. I stayed until my hands were stiff. Then I stood, walked down the path, and kept walking until I reached a corner with a little coffee shop. Faded awning. One blinking open sign in the window. I stepped inside. It was warm, smelled like burnt espresso and old books. A girl behind the counter looked up, startled, like she hadn't seen anyone walk in for hours. "Coffee?" she asked. I nodded. She didn't ask for my name. I didn't offer it. I sat at a table near the window with my hands around the paper cup, letting the heat sting my palms. Outside, the world kept turning. Inside, I started to unfreeze. Across from me, a man in a puffy jacket was reading a newspaper. A college student typed loudly. The barista hummed as she wiped the counter. None of them knew who I was. None of them expected me to explain. Sometimes freedom looks like a table for one. My phone buzzed once. I didn't flip it over. I took one sip of coffee, just enough to taste the bitterness. And in that moment, bitterness tasted like clarity. 2 days passed. I hadn't gone back to my son's house, hadn't returned his one text that said, "Everything okay?" With no punctuation and even less concern. I was staying at a small roadside motel near the park. The kind with loud pipes and a vending machine that ate your quarters. The heater clicked all night. The blankets were thin, but the solitude was thick and honest. On the second morning, a letter slid under the door. It wasn't from him. It was from my bank. I opened it while sitting on the edge of the bed, the TV still on mute behind me. Notification of authorized account update. It said at the top. There was my full name, my address, my account number. And then it said this: "Your designated financial agent has been updated." My heart didn't skip. It stopped. I kept reading. My son's name. His signature. A date from 4 days ago. A sentence in fine print. Updated authorization intended to streamline account oversight for senior clients. Streamline. I stared at the bottom of the page. My signature was there. My handwriting. My name. Only I'd never signed anything. He had forged it. Or worse, filed it with something I signed blind, trusting him. That trust, it turned to ash in my throat. I called the bank immediately. The woman on the line was calm, professional. "Yes, ma'am, this was submitted in branch." She listed the time, the location. His branch. I asked if I'd ever signed anything to that effect. "There is a record of a signature," she said. "We can send you a copy for verification." When it arrived by email, I clicked the file. I stared at the loop of the J, the slant of the Y. Close. Familiar. But it wasn't mine. I sat back in the creaky motel chair and stared at my hands. He hadn't just uninvited me from his life. He'd rewritten mine on paper without me. Not mother. Not family. Just a convenient name with a balance. I wasn't a person. I was a document. I thought of every form I'd signed for him over the years. Camp waivers. Car loans. College fees. I thought of when he was 17 and handed me a permission slip with a smile, and I signed without reading because I loved him. He was still handing me papers. But this time he wasn't waiting for a signature. He was using the ones I'd already given him. The kind you can't erase. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I printed the email, folded the copy, and placed it beside my teacup. Then I opened the nightstand drawer and took out the small leather wallet where I kept the only business card that had ever mattered. Alan Strickland, attorney at law. Estate planning, elder law, and personal transitions. He helped me when George passed. He'd know what to do now. I dialed the number slowly. When his assistant answered, I said, "I need to update my will." "Pause," she asked. "When would you like to come in?" "Today." I didn't throw a fit. I didn't march over to their house. I didn't call him to ask why. I sat down at the little motel desk, legs crossed at the ankle, hands still, and pulled out the envelope I kept in the bottom of my coat pocket. It had traveled with me for over a decade. Yellowed edges, soft from years of moving drawers. Inside. One business card, one folded document, one blank sheet of paper that once held a letter I never mailed. I unfolded the card. Alan Strickland. He'd been kind to me when George died. Not just professionally kind, human. He had looked me in the eye and called me ma'am without condescension. That mattered. I dialed the number. A woman named Michelle answered. I told her my name. She said, Mr. Strickland's next opening is Thursday. I'll wait. I walked there. 40 minutes down cracked sidewalks, passing auto shops and laundromats and small houses with sagging porches. My knees ached, but I welcomed the pain. It reminded me I still chose my direction. The law office sat in a one-story brick building beside a shuttered donut shop. The sign said Strickland and Tate, gold letters flaking. Michelle looked up as I stepped in. Her smile was gentle. Mrs. Edwards? Mr. Strickland will be right with you. The waiting room smelled of lemon cleaner and dust. A fake fern wilted near the window. When he emerged, he looked older, thinner hair, more sunspots, but the same steady eyes. Let's talk, he said. We did. I handed him the document from the bank. I told him everything. Not with drama. Just facts. Then I said, I want to remove my son as beneficiary. Completely. He blinked once. And what would you like to do instead? I looked him in the eye. I want to leave everything to my granddaughter, if she'll have it. And I want it protected. No access before 25 unless it's for education or a home. He nodded slowly, took notes. I also want to revoke his power of attorney. Understood. And Alan, I said quietly, I want you to file a fraud report on the signature. Not to punish, just to have it on record. He paused. You're sure? Yes. He didn't ask why. Just pulled out the forms. We spent 2 hours revising everything. He printed out fresh pages. I signed with the same hand that had once written my son's name 100 times on permission slips, on birthday cards, on the line that said, emergency contact. Now I was crossing him out. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. By the time I left, the sun had dipped low. I stepped outside into the quiet of an unfamiliar block, the wind tangling my scarf. I didn't have a plan for the next step, but I had one thing I hadn't had in years. My name. My account. My voice. It was the little things that changed first. The way I walked into rooms, slower yes but taller somehow. The way I stopped checking my phone. The way I stopped rehearsing what I might say if he ever called. I didn't wait for that call anymore. I didn't dread it either. I just removed the ringtone. The next morning, I stopped into a notary office to finalize some of the documents Alan had given me. It was tucked between a payday loan storefront and a check cashing place, with a dusty potted plant in the window and a bell above the door that jangled like a worn-out laugh. The girl behind the counter looked about 22. Soft freckled skin. Bright lipstick a little smudged. She handed me a clipboard then paused. Sorry, she said, but you look like someone who's just come back from something. I smiled, and for the first time in days it didn't feel like a lie. Not quite, I said. More like I finally left. She blinked like she didn't quite get it but knew better than to press. While she notarized the pages, she looked at one of the forms and asked, Is that your son's name? I nodded. She tapped her pen twice on the counter then said quietly, Good for you. That was all. But it stayed with me. I walked out with a manila folder tucked under my arm. The street was loud, buses groaning, someone shouting into a phone, music spilling from a passing car. But inside me it was calm. Still. I passed a bakery with a chalkboard sign that read, Fresh Start Scones, $1.25. I went in. The woman behind the counter was older than me. Hair pulled tight, apron dusted with flour. What can I get you, sweetheart? Just a coffee, I said. And maybe one of those fresh starts. She laughed, a short hoarse bark. Honey, if only they worked like that. I shrugged. One can hope. She poured the coffee, handed me a paper bag. As I turned to leave, she said, You're not from around here, are you? Not anymore, I said. She tilted her head. Well, you walk like someone who stopped asking permission. I didn't answer, but I smiled. She wasn't wrong. That afternoon I bought a notebook. A cheap one. Blue cover, college ruled. On the first page I wrote one sentence. They didn't erase me. I walked off the page. A full week passed before my phone rang again. Not a text. Not a forwarded article or photo of Tyler's new haircut. A call. From him. The name on the screen still read, Michael. I hadn't changed it. Not yet. Maybe I wouldn't have to after this. I let it ring twice before answering. Mom. he said, voice thin, almost rehearsed. Can we talk? I didn't respond. He took my silence as permission. I saw the papers, he continued. You changed everything. You removed me. Still I said nothing. I mean, why? After everything I've done for you? That made me blink. Everything he'd done for me? I remembered the forged signature, the cold dinner, the silent exclusion. You didn't even talk to me first, he added. My hand tightened around the phone. Finally, I said quietly, almost gently, because I'm not something to be managed. He was silent. I kept going. You said I wasn't a priority, so I took your advice. Pause. Breath. Then, I prioritized myself. I heard the exhale on the other end, the shifting of weight. He wanted a fight or maybe forgiveness. I offered neither. You've been acting out of emotion, he said. You're not thinking straight. I nearly laughed. Not out loud but deep in my ribs. I'm thinking clearer than I have in years. He started to say something else, but I didn't wait. I pulled the phone away from my ear and ended the call. Not dramatically, just firmly. A simple press of the red button. I didn't hang up on him. I hung up on the version of me who stayed quiet. I turned the phone off completely, placed it face down on the desk. Then I poured myself a glass of water, sat by the window, watched the wind play with the flags outside the motel. For the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting for a man to understand me. Not my late husband, not my son, not anyone. Let them spin. Let them stew. Let them search for the version of me that always came when called. Now they know what silence sounds like from the one who always showed up. And that silence, it wasn't cold. It was clean. The email came through on a Thursday morning. Subject line: finalized estate updates. Alan had moved quickly. Everything was done. Notarized, filed, recorded. I sat at the motel desk, the laminate surface warm from the sunlight streaming in, and clicked the attachment. The documents were clean, precise, emotionless. Just black ink confirming a shift no one could undo. My son was no longer the beneficiary, no longer the financial agent, no longer the assumed future handler of mom's affairs. He was just a man now, a grown man. And for the first time in his life, he'd have to stand on his own, without my name propping him up. I printed a copy and slid it into a new folder, one I'd bought just for this. Cream-colored with a silver clip. I placed it in my suitcase beside the other papers. The fraud report, the notarized signature comparison, the notarized new will. Closure didn't feel loud. It felt filed. Somewhere across town he was reading the same email. Maybe pacing. Maybe shouting. Maybe asking Olivia how this happened. It didn't happen. I made it happen. I didn't need to see his reaction. I'd already seen everything I needed to. The quiet dismissal, the strategic signature, the disappearing chair at the table. Let him feel the weight of absence now. Not the kind that screams or slams doors. The kind that simply removes its name from the mailbox. I spent the afternoon walking to the nearest print shop, making certified copies. The clerk there, a man in his 60s with yellow-tinted glasses, glanced at the title on the form and said, "Lot of that going around lately." I didn't answer, but my eyes did. When I left, he called after me, "Take care of yourself, Miss Mississippi." I hadn't been called that in years. That evening I packed my bags. Not with panic, with precision. I booked a ticket out of state. A town I once visited on a whim with George. Mountains, silence, an old inn with breakfast served on real plates. I didn't tell anyone. Didn't leave a note. I simply erased my digital trail. Disabled location. Changed my number. Deleted the shared calendar that still pinged reminders for birthdays no one celebrated together. By the time the sun dipped behind the motel sign, I was gone. Not in body, but in availability. They didn't lose me. I disconnected. And if they ever looked again, they'd find nothing left to claim. I drink tea on the porch now. Not the porch of a house I raised a family in. Not the porch of my son's second home that always felt like a guest room in someone else's life. This one is mine. Small, wooden, painted the wrong shade of green by someone else long ago. The chair creaks. The railing leans. But it faces the mountains. And no one here expects me to apologize for being here. A notebook rests on the table beside my cup. The pages are half filled with dates and scribbled notes. Plans for Georgia. Not the state. The country. It's a place I once circled in a magazine years ago. Back when George was still alive and everything felt like maybe someday. Now there's no one to ask permission from. No one to wait on. No calendar to sync. I write the words slowly. Tbilisi. Wine country. Train to Batumi. A breeze carries the scent of pine and something warm baking in a neighbor's oven. I don't know their names. They don't know mine. It's perfect. No one's asked where I went. No one's called to say, "We miss you." And that, I've learned, is the gift. Because I no longer miss them either. The last time my grandson messaged was a month ago. A forwarded meme. No words. I didn't answer. Not out of anger. Out of balance. When you stop being their backup plan, they stop checking for your signal. And you stop broadcasting it. I sip my tea. The notebook flips in the wind, landing on a blank page. I don't fill it. Not today. The quiet hums around me like something earned. I no longer replay conversations in my head. I no longer write drafts of messages I'll never send. I no longer live inside someone else's default settings. I live here. In this slowness. In this chosen absence. In this porch that leans but never falls. If they look for me now, they'll find a stillness they won't recognize. Not silence as punishment. Silence as answer. Sometimes, love is just quietly removing your name from the default list. And not looking back. Real men don't explode. They exit. Subscribe for more power stories.